ngari, ko tai mātou. O kia ora tātou kātou ko taita wā, tātou whakarongo ki ngā kupu, me te kōrero hoki o te perimia, a hako nā te kaha o te kohu, ki kōnei a o tau tahi, kaore te e rere mai te ropareina, no reira tātou kātou ka hoatu, a te rākau ki a ngai tuahuriri, ki te mihi atu, ki te perimia o Aotearoa.
Tēnei mātou o ngai tuahuriri e mihi atu ki a koe, te mārei kura o New Zealand e, nei rā mātou e tukuto mātou mihi atu ki a koe.
Lizzie and I are here today to talk to you about the claim that we've filed before the High Court on Friday, 27th of October. And that claim, and that statement of claim, is why Maori and our claim to fresh water.
E aku nui, e aku rahi, te whakakanohi mai o rātou mā, rurukutia I runga I te nākau whakapono, re rukutia I ranga I te nākau aroha. Waitaha, Ngāti Māmoe, Ngāi Tahu, nau rā te reo pōheri, tēnā tātou katoa. Assalamu alaikum. I'm so sorry that I'm not there with you in person. The fog had other plans for us today, but I'm pleased to know that other ministers will be joining you, and you can guarantee that I'll be checking in on the outcomes from today's hui. To begin, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the survivors and family of the shahada, along with representatives from our communities, academia, members of civil society, and those from the private sector, NGOs and public sector. My greetings to Ngāi Tahu Whānui. Thank you once again for hosting us in Christchurch today.
And you'll all know the Crown Plaza down here, which has been repurposed as a building for a hotel, and it still has almost kept that iconic name for it. And we're also noticing that so many of the hotels in Christchurch these days don't have any, or have very minimal conference facilities or rooms, because they're all hoping to use the town hall and Te Pai when it opens. So Te Pai being the new convention centre being built just down to our right, which we're going to come along the side of. It's coming past the town hall, which has been recently reopened. So the key thing about Victoria Square, and we'll hopefully be able to come for a walk back through Victoria Square, is that we tend to think of it as Victoria Square. It actually was the Ngāi Tahu, and before that the Waitaha and Ngāti Māmoe marketplace, if you like. So it's a very significant part of Christchurch. We tend to think of it as very much in a European history. It's not. It's where you could come as far up the river on the tide. It's a very significant place, all of its own. It's just that we turned the city towards the cathedral square instead of to where it had been. So this is Te Pai on our right.
He mahi toi e kohatu nei te hitori a te iwi kāinga.
Incorporates our fish, our birds, the manu, the titi, the eels and the inanga, that all comes from Ōtākaro.
Ko ngai tuahuriri te iwi o te whenua nei kei te puku o te taone o Ōtautahi, ko te awa o Ōtākaro, ara ko te Avon, e rere nei I Wainganui.
Where we are standing at the moment is our marketplace.
He oe e mohio tiana tēnei wāhi ko Victoria Square.
Tēnei tangata he mokopuna o Maingatere e te whanaunga e kānui te mihi. Really delighted to be here to not answer any of those hard questions that our fabulous MC just identified needing to be asked, but instead to introduce two fabulously qualified speakers on this topic. So we have Tracy McIntosh, no Nai Tūhoi, a professor with the University of Auckland, but a renowned expert commentator on so many issues, I'm not sure when she sees her whānau. She's a Fulbrighter. She is dedicated to social justice. E te Taurikura, nau mai tauti mai. And mokupuna o nai tuahuriri, a political philosopher, an expert in ethics, and a fellow of the Ngaitahu Research Centre. It's a pleasure to have you both.
Why on earth, after all, would people of colour, given our community's history, want to help? We must, in some sense, in our hearts, confront the history of the settler terror state. To accept that it's our history. You can't work around it. The history of it all is so gobsmackingly awful that to gloss it is impossible. The government apparatus was built by settlers, initially non-democratic elites who actually tried to hold back the worst of settler settlement, but by late 1859 it was unleashed in its ugliest faces, in the sovereignty wars, and when Māori turned to peaceful protest, to their rendition down south, leaving Māori communities at, for instance, Raupaki, to make sure they didn't starve. To ensure that their hold on violence, the monopoly of violence, was used and still is used to privilege property rights and secure them for white peoples. Which is weird because I look white, right? But I get to be Māori. How does that work? Identity's tricky. And so, of course, the state's blind spot is white nationalism. White nationalism, settler nationalism, is built into every nook and cranny of the settler state, from its initial legislation to its actions stopping Māori ever contesting sale of land in courts. You might say that is history. The state is founded in settler nationalism only, but it perpetuates it. Look at how hard systemic disparities for Māori are to change. Or when we managed, my microphone doesn't like what I'm saying, or when we managed to get just a tiny recognition of customary title in the foreshore and seabed, the Kawana rose from its privileged position at the top of the system and pushed back our taniwhas into what they call unowned water, hurling haters and wreckers at them as they went. This is the type of action that established and perpetuates kawanatanga and gets in the way of communities being able to work with it. Yet, for all of that, my granddad was in the first echelon and fought at Casino alongside the Māori battalion. How did he know who to fight? It was over in Germany.
Approaches into prevention and of countering terrorism and violent extremism in Aotearoa means that Māori must play a leadership role in ensuring that the nuance and contours of everyday racism and extreme forms of racism are collectively understood. That countering racism is most successful through disrupting the processes that lead to the intergenerational transfer of social inequalities and social, cultural, material and spiritual poverty. In Te Ao Māori, relationships are the lifeblood of our social lives. We treasure the knowledge that we glean off each other and how this intersects and creates the narrative for our shared futures. The terrorist attack on March 15, 2019, driven by racist narratives that were both extreme yet horrifyingly commonplace, means that through a Te Ao Māori lens, Māori, and particularly mana whenua, now have ties not only to those that have died and those who survived here, but also ties to whānau in Pakistan, in India, in Bangladesh, in Egypt, in United Arab Emirates, in Fiji, in Somalia, in Syria, in Indonesia, in Jordan, and in Kuwait. And the other countries where those who died came from.
Thank you, Tayaba. Basically, this is more of a comment, and thank you for that. You mentioned the issues that the Sikhs had in France. My heart goes out to every person who lost their family and friends and salam alaikum, and basically I feel for you, but we as turban-wearing Sikhs face equal amount of discrimination, racial abuse, and bullying at schools, education sector, workplace, in our day-to-day lives. You're the only person since yesterday morning, the only panelist who mentioned Sikhs. So I am fully thankful, very much grateful for you to bring that up, because even though I understand what are we here for, you pointing out the comments, because we as a turban-wearing Sikhs, we face we are pretty much on the same boat as a hijab-wearing woman, because we are discriminated because of our looks. So we are called different names, different things. You mentioned that, and I couldn't be thankful to you. Thank you so much for that.